Alright, hello guys. So we just finished talking about the load heights. So let's talk about purlins, the single, multiple, and Verona, and midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and hit flatten. And as you can see, that completely removes everything. Also, if you mess up and hit flatten and you hit Control Z, it does not, and I will repeat this, it does not save your last move. So you have to be extremely careful. I have lost many worlds where I was like, oh my god, I love this, and I was working on it for a couple days, just like making it look really pretty, and I was using paintbrushes with detail and stuff like that, and I lost my entire thing. So that will be a future update. Not next one, but the one after that, probably. So Perlin noise, this is exactly what it looks like. A Perlin noise is essentially just a bunch of noise, and if you look at it from the ground up, you can kind of see the graph that it would come from. Now, you can edit the scale of these things. Like, for example, if I edit the X scale and the Y scale, it's going to look a lot more choppy and a little bit more pointed. So you can Control Z that, and that will go back. So in the editor, as long as it's not on this object, in the editor, if you can hit Control Z and then Perlin noise that. So octaves is essentially just how high these go in the hills and valleys, essentially. I typically like it around 3, just because it's a little bit softer. Persistence is basically how rough the terrain is and how the divots are. So, for example, this looks a little bit more like sand dunes now, which is kind of nice. And a height scale is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's how high these can go. So I typically leave that pretty low, and I'll leave the persistence a little higher, and then that's about it. The offsets are exactly what it sounds like. You pull it to the right, and it'll move. And if you hit Perlin noise, you can see that it's pulling to the right or the left, depending on the Perlin noise itself. Okay, so that's it for single. So the multiple is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to be greeted with a list of these, and we'll say I want 4 Perlin noises, right? Element 1, it's that exact look. Element 2, it's that. 3, and then 4. And when you want to remove them, you just press that and you hit the minus, and it'll remove that element and move the one below it up. So I'll hit apply multiple Perlins, and you can see that looks pretty jagged. So in the future, these will become sliders as well. However, right now they're like this. So you can go to your single Perlin noise, and you can do, you can take all the default values, which is what this is. This is all default, and just fill them out as you would normally. And what it will do is it will just add on top of each other. Now you could get the same reaction if you turn off the reset terrain and use a single Perlin noise. You can see how that's getting a little bit higher every time I click Perlin like that. I don't recommend it, but you can do that. When you find that you have a really nice base, like for example this, and I come down to Verona, I hit Verona. See how it just gave me a bunch of hills on these little hills, or these points? That's what that does with the reset terrain. So if I hit reset and I hit Verona, it's going to get rid of everything and just add in the new heights. So Verona looks exactly like this. This is the combined. If we do the linear, you can see that it kind of makes little hills. And then if you do power, it essentially makes those a little bit smaller, combined as both of these combined. And then sine power is essentially like a sine graph with a power. And it will create like little spikes here and there sometimes, depending on what you have it at. Like, let's say I bring up the fall off a little bit more. Let's see what happens. No fall off at all. Yeah. So you can see like it really favors the edge on this, and you can bring up the peak count. That way, you just honestly, like my personal advice would just be to mess around with all this stuff and figure out how it all works. So there's the Verona and Perlins. So we'll get into midpoint right now. And I'm just going to hit midpoint displacement. This is where this entire program gets really powerful. Now you can see I'm coming up with multiple maps. Like if you really wanted to, you can have multiple maps from just this one piece. I used to make everything out of this until I started using it all together. So you can actually bring down your maximum height as well. And what that does is it's a 200% scale. And what that means is, let's say you have 600 units as a maximum height, and then 0 units as a minimum. That should be the normal min. Now, it will be, when you have it at 2.0, it means that it can get all the way up to 600%. And then, like, let's say minimum height is -2. Well, that means that the minimum height can be 0, right? So what we want is somewhere in between, and that's what you have to figure out is, like, how do I get there? You have to mess with the min height and see how that works. It brings up a lot of the terrain around it, and it limits the amount that can just be 0. So you can see, like, there's a nice big lake here. I can see you putting in water here, and then maybe a little bit of sand and rock. Now, that's what I would recommend, is just playing with this. I love this. I love this mode. And the roughness essentially makes it like, how jagged do you want your peaks? I typically bring that down. I'll bring it down or I'll bring it up depending on, like, what I really want to go for. Like, that looks pretty cool. You can, like you can see right now, you can get a lot of different peaks and valleys. So yeah, I would recommend messing with this, figuring out what you like most from each area. Like this, I would honestly keep the roughness amount around here, because this looks a little bit more natural, and see what you can do with that. So that's midpoint displacement. Thank you very much for watching, and the next episode will be on splat maps.